Hello. Thank you everyone for coming today. Really happy to see so many faces. I want to start off by just acknowledging that our event today is on the lands of the Bunurong people, and I want to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land. And I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and any other Indigenous elders that are here today. But without any further ado, I'd just like to introduce myself as well. I'm Connor. I'm the Regional Marketing Manager for Eventbrite in Australia and New Zealand. And we're really stoked that everyone could be here today. I think I'm just going to repeat the same line I said to a few of you as you came in. It's really exciting to put on an event for event creators. You guys don't get enough of that, and we want to do a bit more of that, so we see that as part of our role here at Eventbrite. Eventbrite is a company that's been around in Australia for a while now, and we're really excited to be on the other side, getting through to the other side of the pandemic and really engaging with the event community again. And this is what this event is about. And Reconvene is about coming back together. It's about sharing ideas. It's about learning. It's about how can we grow together in the events industry and how we can do more. And I'd love to do a bit of an introduction. We've got Stephen Angel here, who is the event producer and the host of the Back to the Future of Events podcast. And we've got Kerryn Howell here, who's the creative director of Jack Creative and Events, who I'll hand over just to do a little bit of an introduction about themselves and their backgrounds.
Hi, I'm Kerryn. Jack Creative and Events is an event design agency. So what we do is we kind of ideate all the aesthetics to do with an event design, installation, and we imagine all the things that are possible, and then we work out how to make, build, find, bring them in, install them, and then take them out again. My role is creative director, so what I do inside Jack Creative is I interface with client, I take briefs, I start the ideation process, and then bring in our wider team to begin the execution and development.
My name's Steve Angel. I'm a freelance event producer. I've been in this industry for about 16 years. It's varied, my roles. I started off in an entertainment agency, so booking talent, headline artists for corporate events. I now am freelancing as an event producer, mainly working on special events for clients. So we're talking about gala awards, we're talking about special, end-of-year celebrations, talking about some conferencing, but mainly it's the special events where people are really going out to have some fun. That's been my role, and like many people, I think I just landed in this industry, and here I am 16 years later.
So good. Thank you both for coming today.
Thank you.
So the theme of the event today is thinking ahead and designing for success, which I think everyone here has to do a lot of. And we wanted just to cover a couple different topics. One of the first ones that we wanted to talk about was customer experience. What are we doing at the end of the day? What is the experience that we're trying to provide? And I just wanted to put it to you guys, what is customer experience? How do you think about it?
Well, I'll start.
You start,
okay.
I'll interrupt.
We're friends. It's all right, we're friends. We're going to be talking over one another. It's okay. Look, customer experience ultimately is the way that your audience is engaging with the event and the company and the brand. And it's ultimately where everything starts and how everything is led through to the execution. You're thinking about that. And I remember talking to you, Connor, about this very early on. The best advice I was given, which had nothing to do with events, it was back many years ago when I was studying marketing, was to walk in the shoes of your guests. Always walk in the shoes of your audience. It doesn't matter what event you are running or producing, you have to put yourself in their shoes. And if you do, it helps you ideate that experience and bring that experience to life, because you get to understand those touch points in which they're engaging with this event, and that's probably the most important thing about guest experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from where I sit as a designer, we almost have two audiences that we're delivering to. So we have the experience of our service that we deliver to our client who's holding the event, and then you have that experience where their guests then attend the event. So we're sort of doing two things. We're creating an experience for the corporate client who's our main type of clientele, or a brand or an agency, and then we're also thinking about what that guest experience is going to be for that client. So there's a lot to think about. But yeah, I think as we were chatting about before, it's experiences about what moments you can create. And for me, I think there should be a sense of transformation, almost like stepping into another world. There's the outside world before the event, and then there's the inside world, which is its own creation. And it's also, the experience is what you're left with afterwards. You know, what do you remember, and what was significant, and how did you feel afterwards?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's feeling. It's all about feeling. And we get the opportunity to change people's states and their emotions, and, you know, how when they enter and how they leave, we get the opportunity to play with that. And you want to have a positive experience at the end of it, you know, whether you're selling something to them, or whether you're giving them, or you're doing a brand, you know, maybe it's about brand activation, introducing them to a new product or to a new idea. It's a wonderful kind of, you're almost like a maestro within an orchestra. You know, you have the opportunity to conduct this experience and how it feels. And that's, I think, the joy of customer experience in events.
Totally. I think like measuring experience is a really hard one. Like when you think about the events that you've run, how do you know that someone had a good time? What are the things that you look for, or how do you get that feedback to the kind of things that you're doing?
There's a number of ways. You know, where I sit inside the event sort of spectrum is different. Steve can quite often be in the room and see things as they happen. Whereas we have different feedback filters. So, you know, we're having a chuckle before. It's like, how drunk is the client at the end of the night when we come back in to back up? How many kisses have they given me? How much do they tell me that they love me? It's like, how many things have been stolen because people are having such a good time? Are they still on the dance floor? Are we waiting for an extra half an hour outside of the room to access it because everyone's having such a great time that the client pays for another half hour for the DJ to keep playing and keeps the bar open a little bit longer? And we also have event feedback as well, where we kind of send through, you know, a beautiful collection of photographs, and that for us is a really good prompter. It's like a gift that we send back to the client, and all of a sudden they have this rush of memories of what happened, and they just write an email and they tell us everything we need to know. So that's been a really nice little trick that we've learned over the years.
Yes.
Remind them of the pretty bits, and then they just go, oh, and this happened and this happened.
And there is, you've also, to understand the success of an event, you've got to understand what you're looking for as well. And that's all part of the, you know, initial brief, understanding who's involved in, you know, how we're going to work out, you know, return on investment, who's going to make those decisions, who is, you know, the key stakeholders. You know, you're often, if you're not running the event yourself, I mean, which you'll understand what those indicators will be, and you're working for somebody else, for instance, you need to know who that is and what they're looking for and how they will measure it internally as well. And there are many ways. I mean, obviously you've got the very tangible on the day kind of indicators, you know, dance floor is full, people are happy, no one wants to leave the event, you know, people are engaging in Q&A, in a conversation, you know, in a fireside chat like this. They're really obvious. But then afterwards, once it's over, you know, there'll be other things they're going to be looking for, and, you know, amount of sales, you know, made tickets, you know, and then there's feedback forms, you know, post-event feedback forms that you're going to send out, and you're going to engage with the key stakeholders, and they're going to come back and they're going to start to tell you a bit more that maybe what you didn't see on the day. So it all has to be established very early on, because if you don't know what you're looking for, then you don't know what you're going to measure at the end.
Totally. And I guess like when you start thinking about customer experience, when is that in the process? Where is that?
Early on.
Very
early on.
Yeah.
Once we understand why they're doing the event, it's very important to understand why you're doing an event. in my experience, I've found that there's really three main things that people do an event for. They're either going to communicate something, like it could be a brand message, it's going to be a product launch, it's going to be an activation, it's a marketing exercise, it's a PR exercise. So that's one form. Then the other form would be like a celebration, a bit more what I do, celebrating through gala awards. There'll be, end of year functions, or you're recognising people for their efforts. Or the other one would be educate. They're educating. So it's like this, or it's a workshop, it's a conference. So I think once you understand that, then you kind of understand, okay, what am I looking for? How does that experience need to be laid out for that particular kind of event?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's that first point of contact, and I'll generally always attempt to make a phone call initially to get to know who, I'm potentially going to be working with, and get a sense of their vibe, my vibe, how we're going to work together. And I take a lot of notes, and feed them all back into the system, educate the team about that. And so it's a really good marker for me to keep returning to remind myself, who this person is and what the experience is that we're creating, so we can keep that consistency all the way through.
Amazing. And when you're planning, what are the kind of questions that you would ask? What are the kind of processes that you would go through to make sure that no stone is left unturned, I suppose, when it comes to the experience?
I think quite often it's trying to find questions that they almost haven't asked themselves, like the clients. It's like, for me, two really important questions are, what does a successful event look like to you? And how will you know that this event has been successful? It's like, if you can get those two pieces of information, then you've got a really good place to start creating from, and just that foundation stone to keep coming back to. Because particularly being a creative person, I'd go down rabbit holes and tangents, and the amount of times that I've come back and gone, oh, we're way off this brief. We've really gone, sideways. So, just keeping those core fundamental values of the client and what they want to create and what is going to be successful for them is, that point that we need to keep coming back to.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add on, it is a lot of questions. You're asking lots and lots of questions, which, this is the obvious: what, where, how, why, all of those things. What have they done in the past? That gives you an indication of, where they've been before. What's worked, what hasn't worked. It kind of gives you a framework. You're kind of narrowing down a very broad brief into a very narrow one that you can actually work with to give you parameters. So the more questions you can ask in that initial sort of conversation, whether it be to yourself or whether it be to a client, you really want to narrow that down, because the more focused it is, the better you'll be in that design process, especially in pre-production.
What worked and what didn't work is such a good question, because it's actually tangible for them.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, I really hated that, or yeah, I really loved that.
Yeah.
So that's a really effective question for sure.
Speaking of things that didn't work, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you think you've learnt from in your career so far, especially when it comes to customer experience? Learning opportunities.
You want to start? I've got all day.
I think not asking enough questions.
Yeah.
We were talking about just the failure of presumption. It's like every time you presume something, guaranteed, it's incorrect. And making sure you ask enough questions so there's no situation of Chinese whispers when you're starting to expand beyond yourself and to suppliers and subcontractors and larger teams and venues and all the other stakeholders to have that clarity. So that situation where you haven't asked enough questions, it's like, do you know what, I'm at that point where it's like, this might be a little bit annoying, but I do have another 3 questions for you. But do you know what? The clients that we work with, they actually really appreciate it, because it shows that we care, it shows that we're engaged, and it shows that we're listening. it might take them a day to get back to us or whatever it is. But it's always worth, the times we haven't asked questions or haven't prepared enough and done the groundwork has always been the thing that, unravels us.
It is the assumptions that you make. I also find that practical things, not reading contracts clearly, when you're engaging suppliers or even talent or other management companies, you really need to understand what that scope of what they believe that job is about and what you believe that you've engaged them for. Understand, what happens when things change, because, you may have a particular budget and all of a sudden the parameters have changed from what you've engaged them with, and all of a sudden you realise you now have to pay a lot more because that's changed for them and no one's informed them of that. That's sort of got me unstuck a few times. Also working with, entertainers, what's included, that might be the price, but there's production, travel, green room riders, there's so much more money that needs to be added in. So again, with that understanding, so reading, and then details. I think what also happens is you've got to be really good at you're so much better than I am when it comes to being meticulous with details, is that things will happen, you'll start here, and then things will change very quickly throughout the whole process of creating your event. And you've got to record these changes. You've got to record these details. You can't just say, "I'll remember that. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've got to do that," because something will come in the way and you'll forget. And then when you get to your event, you realise, I didn't put that down somewhere where I could have got back to it. So systems are really important because, the details will change very quickly. That's where I've gotten unstuck too.
Absolutely. I feel like you've read my mind about what topic I wanted to move to next. I think nothing sucks the creativity out of an event like budgeting or wrong budgeting. What are your sort of top tips for managing a budget?
Well, I've got to say one thing though. I think it can suck the life out of it, especially for a creative, because a creative doesn't like constraints, right? And but you can sometimes work towards a budget as well, and knowing what the budget is actually gives you very strong parameters, and you can be incredibly creative with very little money if you're willing to do a bit more of the legwork yourself. So you can make things work. But I think the most important thing about a budget is that it does give you a parameter. You know what you're working for, you know how much time and effort you can put in. And it's being very clear with that, understanding everyone has finite budget. Doesn't matter how big the company is. They may have $1 million budget, but that's $1 million budget. That's it. You're not going to get $2 million out of them. If you've got $1,000, you've got $1,000. So you've got to know what that is, and you've got to work backwards and understand what your hard costs are, what are the non-negotiables in your budget, what can't change, what you need to have. Understand what your break-even point is. If you're actually selling tickets, you need to know what that is, because okay, well, we need to sell 50 tickets or 2,000 tickets, and then at least it won't cost us. And you've got to do a lot of research so you know what real costs are. It's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to sort of describe our business as a paint by numbers scenario. It's like we can't paint without the numbers. People think being creative is about working outside the box, but sometimes you get the best results working inside the box. You can bounce around inside that box. I'll step outside of the box to create all the big ideas, and then we'll cherry pick all the best ones and bring them back into the box. And I think that distillation of, taking things way out there and then bringing them back in, and, it's actually really satisfying. We are meticulous, and we do on a budget all the time, and to be able to present client with something that is quite extraordinary and it fits in your budget, that's a really lovely thing to be able to do. We've actually won jobs over other agencies because they haven't respected the budget. It's like, we always respect the budget. We'll offer them options. It's like, if you happen to find a little bit more money, we could actually do this, this and this. But here's your complete concept in your budget.
Absolutely.
And detail too, Connor. A lot of detail in budgets. It's really important to understand where everything is going and what everything costs. Because one, if you are working with a client, for instance, if that is what you're doing, they want to see where that money is going. Sort of top line items might be okay in the beginning, but putting $50,000 down there and saying that's styling and furniture, it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, how much furniture? What does it look like? So yeah, the detail, but then it also allows them to go, all right, let's pull that out. And when you can pull it out of the budget, you still have everything else in place. You're not having to rework it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. No one's immune from a spreadsheet, is what I hear you saying.
No, you've got to make friends with Excel. Yeah, you really do.
Even as much as I try, I'm a creative. No, I'm a spreadsheet person now. Where do you start with researching? How do you build that catalog in your head of how much things should cost, and where do you start with that?
You just start asking questions. You start, calling people, and it accumulates over time. Now, I mean, if you ask me, I could give you fairly good ballparks on pretty much anything that we're doing. Even today, I could tell you how much really everything is going to cost. But that's
it's very expensive.
Yeah.
I won't give it away. No. But it's just asking questions. If you want to know what a venue costs, you call the venue up. But here's the thing. As a supplier and so forth, if you are just researching, be really transparent with the people you're speaking to about researching. Because, if it's your very first event and you're trying to work out what it costs, tell the venue or tell the caterer, say, look, it's my first event, I've never done this before, can you give me an indication? But don't pretend that you're putting on an event and which you're not ready to do an event on, and then take people's time, because after 15 years or so, 16 years working in an agency where we've got a lot of students asking us, but they're sending these random emails just to say, we've got an event on and doing this, and it's really just a little project that they're doing. I have no problems helping students at all, and I teach at universities and so forth, but just let us know, because it takes a lot of time. And so if you're doing that to every supplier and you're taking a lot of their resources away, it can get frustrating. So what I would just say is just be really honest when you're doing it. It's my very first event, or I have no idea, can you help me? You will just get a better response. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And in pitch situations as well, be honest with that stuff as well. It's a two-way stream. When you're asking for information to generate costs, also getting that same level of transparency from your client is a really important space to reach. You can't always reach it, but you can try. And for us, establishing where those costs go inside of a budget is also establishing a hierarchy of priorities from the client as well. And, once we have those priorities, essentially we figure out what we need to make first. So we strip away, it's that level of event, let's allocate this much, it's going to cost this much to bring this many suppliers in to deliver and take it out again. These are going to be our design fees. Let's pull those costs away, and what's left? That's what we design with, and then we separate that out and go, okay, that's going to be allocated to stage, that's going to be allocated to entrance, this for table centerpieces, this for that, and then we just keep working with those numbers until we reach the right sort of point where we're delivering on the most important things for the client, we're not losing money, everything's looking good, and there's some options there for if they want to take things further.
Yeah, that framework of how to split up a budget into what portions are the most important, right? Do you start, is it all visual? Is it all talent costs? Yeah. It must be, hard to figure out what that split is. Is that something you feel like you've perfected over time, or is it different for each kind of event?
It's different for every event. And again, it's understanding what the client needs, and if it's a small budget, for example, with our creative process, it's they can have an inspiration board, but they're not getting renders. They're not getting 3D renders of this. We can communicate clearly in a board of pictures with some annotations what our vision is and some pictures of product. And then if it's that higher level delivery that's required, it's okay, this is going to need a budget allocated to doing renders because they need that level of detail. And then you've got construction drawings as well. So then we need to build construction drawings for anything that needs to be built. So there's different levels. And then there's ones where we're pretty much the, creative visual conductor where basically we're just coming up with the ideas and pulling the right people in and standing there and letting them execute it. So, that's a different level of budget where we can throw more money at the stuff, and take a back seat while all the experts handle actually putting it together.
Yeah, I mean, every event, when there is a core elements for every event, AV is one of the core elements. We're going to need it. Like the guys here, like, you're going to need it to, whether it be for sound, vision, projection. I mean, they're kind of your core. Catering's kind of your core. Venue hire is going to be your core. And then there's going to be, whether it be furniture, branding, those kinds of things are core. Working in special events, things that always get cut are things like, entertainment, theming, all the fun stuff that gets in there. But that's just the nature of the beast. You gotta have an event where you can feed people and present information, and then the rest is really just going to be nice to have if you can get it.
Yeah. It's also not lost on us how meta this is that we're talking about all this in an event that we've designed.
Exactly.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, because Steve, you call yourself the talent maestro, was
yes. Not personally, but yes.
known as the talent maestro.
Okay, yes.
I wanted to have a question about like suppliers. How do you find like the right people to work with?
Yeah. Look, that's just like anything in life. There'll be a trial and error. You will start off with some people that you think are going to be right for you, and you learn through trial and error. But if I was to start again, I think it's just a matter of attending as many events as possible, seeing what you liked, what you didn't like, getting to know the suppliers, seeing their work in action, because everyone can, like, even now, when I started, the use of the internet and was not as sort of as heavy as it is now, so anyone can make themselves look quite big and professional and really sort of a lot more experienced than they actually are. So I feel like the most important thing when you're taking something from online to offline, which is what we're doing, we need to see that in real life. The quality of the furniture, you need to see that. You need to see the level of production equipment, the level of catering, what does it look like? People can say a lot of things, but you want to see how that feels and in reality. So I'd attend a lot of events, see what they're like. And it's not just events. Go outside of just the events. We were talking about this before. Go to the exhibitions. Go to theatre. Go to bars. Just expand sort of your awareness where you can get suppliers from. And then I think it's just a matter of finding people that you actually gel with in terms of personality as well and values, because you're ultimately going to make these people part of your team, and they're going to represent you when you're going out in whatever event you're going to do. So the reason Kerryn and I work together is because I trust her, and we like each other, and we've seen each other's work. But that's come after many years. I've known Kerryn for maybe 15 years or something, but we've only really been working together for maybe 5 or 6 years. So you're always on the lookout. But then you're always, no matter what we do, we're working with people. And it's people that you're going to want as part of your team. And so when you're finding suppliers, you're kind of looking at their product, but then you're looking at them as people and going, okay, can we work together? And it's not just about the product. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all of that. It's the vibe, For us, we view our brand as a service provider at a specific level of quality and values, and we really do gravitate over that time of just like assessing and seeing who's out there, finding people who share our same values, because we're completely committed to the client having the most exceptional experience ever. It becomes clear very quickly in an event space who's on that same boat as you, who's going to do whatever it takes to get it over the line, who's not going to whinge about it, who's just going to roll up their sleeves and get the job done, put a smile on their face and do it. And, for me, actually being in a room of exceptional people who all specialise in their own craft, bringing those people together and giving them the same page to work on is just a magical experience. And you know what? anytime the client's been in the room with that level of energy of people all with a common goal producing an event, they feed off that, like they can tell instantly. And those clients will make sure they're back in the room before the event's on every time because they just want to be around it. It's so infectious being on a team with people who are all really gunning for the same outcome.
Yeah.
I think the same can be said for like attendees as well. I think when you feel that level of commitment to what's going on, like that feels seamless, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Who are your magic people? Like, who are the people that you trust, I suppose, when you're doing things, and what are their values that you sort of see?
This guy.
Okay. Apart from us too. Look, in my team, as a freelancer, I have these relationships with many people because I bring them together when I need to, and then we kind of disband and we come back together again. But AV is a really important one in terms of, because bringing things to life really relies a lot on technology these days, and you need someone who can trust and someone that you can actually really throw your creative idea to and see how they can bring that to life in terms of vision and audio and lighting, because they're really clever ways of changing a space, and so they're really important in terms of my team. Theming is really important as well. And also there is specialised, I've got a great team of show callers, great team of stage managers and operations. And then for them, I'm always feeling like then I can always bring something to them, and their specialty is so unique and so honed that I don't need to be the person to know everything. I just go, here you go, this is what I want to do. Tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what's going to go wrong here. Where's my failing in this idea? And Kerryn will go, well, that's not going to work. And then the AV will go, well, we can't do this because we don't have height in the ceiling, and it's going to be daylight, so it's going to affect vision, so we can't do that. And then someone, my show caller will go, we're going to need all these acts to be here in this particular time. This is how it's all going to happen. So we're going to need extended time in the venue. So they're like my core, because they help me see the things I don't see sometimes. And I don't want to, because there's only so much that I can put in his head, and so I let them sort of come up with that. So for me, that's my core, especially being a freelancer. And obviously, there's levels. I'd go there's tiers that beyond that, but every event kind of has this core team in it, and then it depends on what the event requires, and then I'll go further out in terms of network.
Yeah, I mean, your level of event management is really unique. If you ever get the chance to work with Steve, you'll know the difference immediately. And for me, you're a storyteller. You're not just an event manager. Getting a brief from you, a creative brief, is so different from receiving a brief from other event managers, because I can tell. You can see it in your head, you can see colours, you can see movement, you can see entertainment, you can see light, and it gives me this amazing springboard. Like, my creativity levels within 5 minutes of just having a conversation with you are already out of the ballpark. So having a great event manager, having a great production manager, somebody who is that beautiful conduit between the creative and the technical, who can bring those things together and kind of be a bit of a safety net. They'll be the person I run to and say, the lighting man's not listening to me properly, he's not seeing my vision, and he'll be like, right, I've got this. And our builders are really important, like having great builders for us, being able to take a design concept of an activation or something like that and bring it into 3 dimensions for us, and floristry as well. Early on I realised there's florists and there's florists, right? And there's florists who specialise in greenery, there's florists who specialise in organic kind of beautiful, free things. Some are really tight. There's some that are really great at banging out multiples of something that's cheap. It's like, they have, niches inside this thing, and being able to pluck the right supplier to fit the the brief that fits the budget for that event is a really important thing to do. You have your favourites.
You do.
But that comes over time.
It does.
Awesome. Well, I think now for the fun part, we want to put it out there for any Q&A. Any questions you guys might have for our lovely guests today. Make them hard questions, I think, as well.
Yes.
I think let's put them to the test. We've got a microphone as well for you.
Hi, thank you guys. It's really interesting hearing you speak today. My name is Lisa. My question for you is, how do you tackle the conflict between sometimes trying to manage the client's experience and the guest experience? Because sometimes they don't align, where your guest is possibly asking for something for their event that you know that's not going to give a great guest experience. So how do you manage that?
Are you referring to having an external client, or are you the client itself?
No, my external client. So right now, got a client.
Yes.
She wants to do something with her event. It's her event. But I know that that's not really going to give the guests a great experience.
Yeah.
But she wants that. Yeah,
it's about being diplomatic, because ultimately she is your client, or that person is your client. So they're going to one who's going to write that check for you. But what's really important is that you present the reasons why you feel that it's not going to work. And it needs to be tangible reasons. And if you have any experience to back up those reasons, then you can present that to them. And then ultimately you need to leave it in their hands and say, these are the reasons why I don't think this is going to work. Because in my experience, this has happened before. And you always want to remind them, you sometimes take them back to the brief that they gave you as well. And if it's clear to you that if you go down their path, that's going to go off brief, then hopefully that gives them enough evidence to say, okay, you're right. But you are dealing with personalities here, and sometimes, if you do have an external client, they have this ownership on the event. And for them, it's part of who they are, right? And so what you're not dealing with is the event itself. You're dealing with their desire to be part of this event, and it's a reflection of who they are. And that's a challenge. I mean, it's a whole kind of psychology that goes on with actually working with clients. And we do this all the time. Like, you're having to deal with that, And some clients can be really quite stubborn about it, and this is my way, and this is what I want, and it's right, and you just have to let it go. And as long as you feel like you have expressed, because that's your role as the event manager, is to give that expertise and that advice and say, this is what I've expressed, this is why I think it's not going to work, but if this is what you want to do, then that's it. And that's where you have to leave it. There's no point in fighting that fight too much, because there is a million other things that you need to do that you're going to be measured on the success of the event, and you may as well get all those right, rather than this one thing that you might be stuck on. That's my advice. Kerryn, do you have anything?
So similar. We handle these things in really similar ways, and you obviously are really good at what you do because you have an understanding of both audiences, which is pretty unique. And for me, it took a little while to figure out. It's like, actually, they're paying me for my opinion, and do you know what? I think it's really important that I show them my understanding of the situation, because the client will tell you that you are wrong, or why didn't you say so? And you never want to be in that situation. It's like, why didn't you say something? You'll find, knowing your client, the very best way to present that information. But it's so much better to say that. And I have different ways, everybody's got a different personality. So it's like, okay, what's the best way to approach this? And for me, I like to frame it as, almost like that yes and, situation where you're always in their corner, you've always got their back. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay, we could do it like that. This is the way I do it, and here's why. But be excited about, presenting that thing rather than coming from a place of, no, it ain't going to work. It's like, let's look at this a different way.
Yeah.
And they can never say, you didn't say so.
Any other questions?
Hi. Have you done much in the hybrid event space, and do you have any good tips around creating a hybrid event?
Yeah, well, obviously, for many of us, that just came out of nowhere. It was a sort of a legacy from the virtual events that also came out of nowhere for all of us. A few years ago, all our experience was in live events, and all of a sudden we're now trying to go online and do it. The thing with hybrid is that you've got two events going on at the same time. You have two different audiences that you have to appeal to. And the trick is really, how do you keep them both engaged without ignoring one of them? Because obviously the interest is going to be mainly on the live component, because you're going to put a lot more effort in there. There's a lot more cost involved in putting that one in there. But you've also got this virtual. So you're basically working two events at the same time. And there will be some sort of sacrifice that has to be put in, because bringing the two together needs to be seamless, but not also interrupting the live event so much because you're trying to cater for the virtual as well. So my first question would be okay, so if it has to be hybrid, how does it have to be hybrid, and what's important with those who are staying online? What do they need to see and do? And are there things that we can do for them that is exclusive to virtual? Because you may then end up having entertainment elements or breaks and things that are just happening for the virtual element that doesn't interfere too much with the live element as well. I'm still finding it to be an interesting space to be in. I don't know if it's always working as well as we'd like it to. And I think that we're still going to have it for a little bit longer, only because what we've also learned is that because virtual has expanded our audience beyond the live, which we didn't have before, and now when you're working with a multinational company, they're saying, well, if you're going to do this event, whereas before they just did it locally or did it for their own region, they're going, well, if it's virtual, we may as well do it to everyone. And so now all of a sudden, they don't want to lose that reach that they used to have before, and that spend can be used for all of it. So I think we're still trying to work out the best way to make it work. It is going to be quite unique. I don't know how well I'm answering your question, but it's still new territory for a lot of us. It's not something that we've got 10 years experience to say this is how it all works, because it's only just really been dumped on us in the last few years, really. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, it definitely is a watch this space situation.
Yeah, it is.
Because everybody's going through their own trial and error with it. And Steve's absolutely right. You are dealing with two separate events, and you're also dealing with two separate audiences. Coming back to those first questions, we were talking about establishing what the outcomes need to be. I think it's really important to not treat those two audiences as needing the same outcomes. They're going to be different. And we've had lots of really interesting conversations, and you always pick out, it's like, God, that's a clever idea.
Yeah.
Never thought about doing that. Even like, I think people get tied into producing a digital experience for those virtual guests as an extension of the live experience. But there are people who are going, we're actually going to pre-record a whole lot of this stuff and create a separate channel that's full of resources, because they can't possibly have that same experience. I'm like, oh, well, that's really clever. And getting really clear on, how to extend beyond a screen and make a connection with those people so they feel engaged and feel part of it, and it's going to be a different delivery. I think clients as well are also wrapping their head around the cost of what it is. The AV producer said to me, we're producing a television show.
Yeah,
we're
that's what
producing
you're
a
doing.
television show. Get real, people. Stop complaining about how much it's costing, because you're trying to do this extraordinary thing, and we're all learning. I try and absorb as much as possible, because there's great ideas and there's so much to learn from those components that don't work.
I think you've made a really good point, and I think that's it, is your virtual is television. Your live is a very different experience, and bringing the two together is not that easy. And I think you do still need to kind of keep them sort of separate and bring them together in just certain points throughout the evening. really so that those who are in the live or in the virtual understand that it's happening at the same time, but they're having different experiences at the same time. Yeah.
Great question. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, interesting.
Hi. We haven't really talked about this subject yet, but how are you guys dealing with cancellations and events not reaching the numbers? Like particularly we had an event on Saturday where we wanted 80 people and it was 43 in the end. And food waste and pre-ordering and...
It's events normally have a drop-off. Like, we're always used to that. We'd always over-cater and we'd cater and we'd know that maybe 5-10% maybe not show up. But that number's much higher now. I think that we're dealing with a lot of hesitancy still, even though I feel that people are more comfortable than they used to be about going out. But I feel like that we still have safety measures in place. And so people are going to be very hesitant to be around large numbers. I feel like there's also a little bit of a... There's also a little bit of it's too much fear, I think, that's stopping people from going as well. And I don't know if it's as warranted as it used to be. And I think we have to wait for that to move forward. What I would say to anyone is that, and I'll come back to answer the question about cancellations, because, we have spent, anyone who's been in this since 2.5 years of dealing with cancellations, postponements. Whereas, before that was really quite obvious. If you cancel the event, well, you're going to pay a deposit at least, or you're going to pay the full amount depending. But there's an expectation now that people can cancel and then expect that they don't have to pay any cancellation fees to do that. And that's kind of getting unfair now, I think, during that period of time when we're really under the sort of lockdown laws and restrictions, and we didn't know what we're dealing with. But I think it's getting unfair now because there's a lot of people in the industry that are losing a lot of money for these cancellations. So I think you need to look at that, and I think you need to be brave enough to say that these are our cancellations and we can't keep avoiding charging for our time, because if we keep doing that and pushing our events further and further away, at what point are we going to get paid for the work we're doing? Because every time we do that, we're almost starting again. No matter how much we've done it, it's like, okay, well, now we've got to maybe find a new venue, or that venue that we had's not available anymore. We've got to start again, and that's time. So we have to kind of demand that a little bit and expect that a little bit as an industry. The other thing in terms of the drop-offs, I mean, the thing is, I think that it will change, but I wouldn't hold back from running events. I think you just need to if it's a ticketed event, was it a ticketed event that you did?
Kind of. It's like a membership group, so everyone who pays a fee has free, but they're paying a yearly fee.
Yeah. I think it's just also a matter of communication. And I think it's about, doubling up on that communication and that pre-event communication to give them more of a reason and to almost, interrupt their day often to say, hey, this is going on, and maybe give them a snippet of what to expect. The burden of getting them there is on you more so now. Just because it's an event, it doesn't mean that they're going to attend. Anything can happen. Anything can happen these days, and it's enough for people to just go, I can't be bothered. I mean, we know it's like in Melbourne. It rains, it gets cold, people go, I'm not going, it's done. It doesn't take much to do that. So I think that it's incumbent upon you as an event person to actually push more to get that buy-in, to get them to come, and it's just going to be more work that we're going to do. We're fighting that laziness, but also that fear that's also still there, and trying to give them that confidence.
Yeah, I suppose, where we sit's a little bit of a different place, where you're direct with the people that are attending, but where we deal with the client who's then got we're that one step removed. And, for us there's been a number of ways, and I think we're all operating very differently now than what we used to. There's so many different considerations that weren't simple considerations before, and, we have morphed one way after the pandemic and thought this is the right way to operate, and then we've changed everything again. the fear of having an event manager or a client not run an event because they're concerned about those costs of what would happen is a really difficult one, because, for us as a service provider, we want to be able to give them enough security that there's not going to be too many terrible things that happen if reassessment needs to be made, or we need to postpone, or there's not going to be as many things there. And, being able to be creative, I think it's a great idea to have that extra level of communication or pre-engagement, as we got battered with when there was the introduction of virtual and hybrid events. Pre-engagement was everything. And if it is a membership base, is there an opportunity to have a bit more of a transparency and bring these people together as a community to reduce those pitfalls? What happens to that food that has been ordered? Like, is there a company that can be donated to, that those things are not wasted for us? We had clients who were going through multiple postponements, and being very clear with them at this point, the flowers need to be bought, and that's now a cost. But at this date, you've got until this date, and then this cost will happen at this date. This needs to be charged, and just being so clear, but really honest. It's like, we're going to try and minimise that impact for you as much as we possibly can, because we want it to be a success for you. We don't want you to not do things because you're worried. And, clients and event managers are landed with huge costs to deal with in these circumstances, and it's terrifying. And so finding creative ways, or being, as, inventive as possible, and just trying to be a musketeer, it's like, we're all in this together and we all want it to happen, and finding ways to bring that community. I don't know if that is, at all, something that's applicable, but, trying to make things work, it's a hard one. It's a really hard one.
I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions, if anyone else.
Hello. So I have a question around technology. Yes. So over the past couple of years, obviously tech has played a huge part and evolved in your day-to-day lives of, like, event management, event design, not just for hybrid and virtual events, but even for the stuff you were just talking about then in terms of inventory management and, communication. So from where you sit, what platforms or tools have you used that have been really beneficial to navigating the last couple of years, but also now that have just become a way of working in the event space?
Well, something that came out because of COVID was like working on sort of shared productivity platforms like Monday.com and things like that, where we now got it's much easier to collaborate with so many different suppliers, and you could bring them all in. Whereas, we weren't really doing that before. We were kind of keeping things quite centralised within our own businesses, and then sort of sharing information as we did. But this kind of real-time productivity really has changed it for me. I mean, I don't carry stock and things like that. So for me, I've found that that's how I'm working with most clients now, and there's that expectation, and everyone's got something that they're using. Whether it be Slack or whether it be Monday or things like that. So I'm finding that's new in terms of how I'm working than I did before. And it does work. It works really, really well, because it also then allows you to delegate a lot better. It also allows you to see where the timelines are and how we're meeting those timelines and getting things done, whereas before it's reducing the amount of meetings that you need to have with your clients and suppliers. So for me, that's probably the one. I mean, apart from platforms from running events and so forth and virtual, that's probably one that I've been using that I've picked up that I didn't do before.
Yeah, our internal systems are off the charts, and we've escalated those so much, and it's been really effective, and it's also been really nice having that transparency, because it gives our staff more flexibility. I don't need them in the room where I can see them to know that they're doing stuff. It's like, because I can see how productive they're being, and they can communicate with me as much as possible, as much as they want to. It actually improves workflow, and I've generated a much better appreciation for what they do and how they do it. Video calls as well. That was one that took me not comfortable with video calls, but I've now sort of gotten to a point where I realise that pretty much at the moment, still 90% of the meetings that I have, it's just like, I'll just send you a meeting invite. It's like, yep, I'm going to be on screen again. It's like, brush my hair this morning. It's like, do the things. But it's been really nice. The good thing about video as well, actually, is that you get that different level of connection with a client that you wouldn't usually get. Like when they're in their beautiful office and they've, got all the corporate things around them. It's different from when you kind of see their dog playing in the background or hear a kid screaming, and you get that different thing. And actually, I've just taken so much more information and expanded because I have profiles on all of our clients. So I want to remember that that person really likes slow cooking. Because we had a conversation about that. I wouldn't have known that if I was in an office with them. And so you develop this different level of rapport with people through having different types of communication. I think that for me has been quite a cool thing, as much as I was resistant to it. I think those are the two main sort of technological things that
another
we've
one,
been
which
embracing.
is, everyone's using it all the time, but the Google Suite, I find just, when you're creating, scripting for your MCs, just having live documents, which before were always like, a save and then, whatever, and then you know which version you're up to. And again, the ease of using that now is so much better. And it just, you have a live document, it gets changed and changed and changed. And so you're there on site and you can just pull it and go, here you go. Or change it on the fly and go, there you go, you've got it. It's you've got the link to it. So those little things are very simple. They're really simple, but really effective, from past kind of productivity that we had.
There's been improvements to the way we operate.
There certainly has.
Yeah, through necessity. It's a good thing.
It is, yeah.
Cool. I think that sort of brings us to time. So I want to say a big thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.